A very good day to you. I hope you had yourself an amazing Tuesday. It is the 20th of August 2024, 1924 East African time. And this is the Black Hot Fire updates with me, Dimori. Of course, I'm here to tell you about each and everything that was making headlines in Africa today. And talk to me on all our social media platforms, on all our pages at Black Hot Fire Network. The Black Hot Fire Radio, it is the media of the 21st century. So we're going to be looking at each and everything. And we're going to start with Kenya. We're going to look at the monkeypox pandemic that has been happening with, of course, we saw the EU announce that it is going to implement travel restrictions due to the monkeypox. They are saying the monkeypox is already a global disaster, but especially in Africa. So they want to implement travel restrictions for African people to go to their place and also for their people to come to Africa. And Uganda, it looks like Uganda is the one of the countries that they are saying has the highest number of cases reported, Uganda and DRC. And it's for that reason that Uganda has even started border surveillance because of the same. Reminds me of the yellow fever, the Ebola. I don't know what happens with Uganda. Uganda is always the first country to see these things. Even for COVID, it was the first country in this region to have the same. And of course, this is going to bring me to a conversation that we had the other day, but we never completed, on how Africa is used as the world's guinea pig. And for a fact, if you look at, for example, the monkeypox and how the narrative is being driven and how the toning and how the messaging is being done, the narrative being driven is that monkeypox is an African disease, is an African problem. Because only one case has been reported outside Africa. It was in Switzerland, if I'm not wrong. But all the other cases have been in Africa, reportedly, with them saying so many people have died from the same in DRC, others in South Africa. And therefore, if they introduce a vaccine, the first place that they're going to have the vaccine done, of course, is going to be in Africa, because that is where they're claiming the disease is having its highest prevalence, is having its highest infection, is having its highest spread rate. So of course that brings me to the conversation on how Africa has always been used as the world's guinea pig, and especially Uganda. As we are talking at the moment, there is an experiment happening in Uganda. It's a test. It's at its testing phase, where they are testing on. They partnered with the US scientists, with some US scientists, and they're having the of new HIV vaccine.
And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. 40 years ago, HIV was identified as the cause of AIDS, and it has been 36 years since the first HIV vaccine trial, but the world still does not have a working vaccine. Now, scientists in Uganda are partnering with the United States to develop an HIV vaccine. Reports say research into the production of the vaccine has already begun. If successful, this could be a ray of hope for millions across Africa. Our next report gets you the details.
Because when Africa succeeds, the United States succeeds. Quite frankly, the whole world succeeds as well.
The United States of America's relations with countries across Africa go back decades. What began as an attempt to nurture and promote anti-communist ideas among the African elites during the Cold War has today shaped up into a strategy to prevent conflict and promote peace and stability in an extremely fragile region. The resource-rich continent has also long been a locale for the United States and Russia to act out their global fight for dominance. America's partnerships in Africa extend to various fields, including diplomacy, development, security, and defense. In East Africa, the United States and Uganda have partnered to fight a deadly enemy, human immunodeficiency virus, or the HIV. Reports say the US's Walter Reed Army Institute of Research has teamed up with Ugandan scientists to develop an HIV vaccine.
First and foremost, there is no teaming up happening. Secondly, do not let all those words make you think that there is a philanthropist reason behind the HIV vaccine testing that is happening in Uganda, and there is no teaming up that is happening. It's just Ugandan people being used to test a new vaccine. It's called the Rapid Vax. It's supposed to allegedly it's supposed to work. And from the women, they tested majorly in women between the ages of 18 and I think 25. From the preliminary tests that they did, they claim that it was 90% effective. But let me look for that story, the exclusive story, because I reported on it on how they now claim that it is very, very effective, especially in women. However, it still comes back to the point of all the countries in the world, the US had to come to a poor African country in order for it to conduct its research on the rapid vax, which I don't even know, I don't even believe, we can't even confirm whether it's actually a vaccine for HIV. And for the fact that HIV is one of those diseases that feeds the big farmers, because now they sell the air. Once you contract this disease, you will have to sell the ARVs every now and then, every year, and of course every month, and of course that's profit to them. So you recovering from the disease is not a profit to them. But let me look at that story as we progress.
The vaccine uses mRNA vaccine technology that came out during the COVID-19 vaccine development. According to reports, research into the production of the new vaccine, called Rapid Vax, has already begun. Researchers propose that the body can more effectively fight off infection because of Rapid Vax's frequent immune system stimulation. Scientists are currently studying the safety of the vaccine candidate, which is in phase 1. They're hopeful it will soon enter the second phase. Last year, the first trial in Africa of 2 combination vaccines to prevent HIV, which began in December 2020, was halted after researchers concluded it was not working. The vaccine was tested on over 1,500 people aged between 18 and 40 in Uganda, Tanzania, and South Africa. Previous trials in South Africa to test the only
And by the way, the same vaccine they tried the same in another African country, and they had to halt it because the data was not even supporting whatever they were claiming. So after they analyzed the data to confirm, it was the trials have not started the other day. They have been happening since December 2020. The first trial happened in December 2020. It was for a drug that they called PrEP-Vac. Currently, there is the PrEP that the people use to prevent you from contracting the disease. You have to take it every time before you are exposed to the virus. Now, what we're coming up with was a PrEP-Vac, and of course, if you look at the description, they're going to talk about the mRNA and everything. They always have to show those words. So they tried that in 2020, and they had to hold the same in 2023 because after they tested, they enrolled about 1,500 Ugandans for the test, all between 18 and 40. And it was due to end, so it started in 2020, it was due to end in 2020. It was due to end in 2024. It was supposed to be a 4-year experiment that was going to involve 1,500 people. However, they stopped that because even though the drug was seen to reduce the risk and it could control the virus, it still was not effective as a tool in ending AIDS as a public health threat. So that was what led to them halting it at first, but it looks like now it's another phase of trial that is happening in Uganda. And the other one had South Africa also involved in the testing. Some South Africans were involved in the same. And it's always African countries. It's always Nigeria, it's always Kenya, it's always Uganda. South Africa, not so much, but it's also always part of it. That's why even MPOX started in South Africa. And now the conversation that is happening throughout the whole of Africa on the same. So the reason I'm talking about Africa being used as the world's guinea pig is because I know the next thing that is going to happen is vaccination against monkeypox, which is not even a threat as we are being made to believe. It's not even a threat as we are being made to believe. There has been one case reported in Kenya, for example, allegedly, which I can't even confirm whether it was monkeypox. We can't even confirm whether it was true propaganda, but only one case has been reported, but it's already been declared a health emergency by the African CDC, the Center for Disease Control, after one case. How many cases of, let's say, if it was another disease, they wouldn't be in a hurry to declare it an emergency like they did with this one. So I do think it's just another plan on the offing where they are going now to start testing vaccines. They are going to start trials. They're going to force Africans to be vaccinated. I personally was forced to be vaccinated against yellow fever, which I don't even know what that is. So this is going to be another thing the same as that. And even to date, I don't think you can go to Uganda or Tanzania without a yellow fever certificate. You need it if you're traveling and you have to be vaccinated. I don't even know what yellow fever is. So it's going to be the same thing with monkeypox now, where the intra Africa travel will be, even outside you'll have to have such things as these certificates. And apart from that, yesterday I was saying I also believe that the monkeypox saga
Vaccine that had
is
shown
serving
any
two
success.
options. That apart from it being a methodology where they're going to use to vaccinate as many Africans as possible, it's also a divisive technique. When I say divisive technique, I mean to divide your attention in what the Romans say, give them the bread and circuses. So now that they can't give you bread, now it's going to be another circus, and that is why we are talking about it right now. Instead of us talking about better things to do with Africa, we are here discussing monkeypox. And I know I'm not the only one in Africa discussing this made up nonsense. So now we shift our focus from the serious African business, and we end up talking about non-entities that have been made to just, kill that renaissance that had started in Africa with the young people in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Kenya. Now people are worried because they think they're going to get monkeypox, and the WHO declared it a global emergency and said that it was not like COVID, but it's an emergency. It's a, you know,
In protection against HIV, the RV144, which was developed in Thailand, was stopped in February 2020 after interim results found it was not working. About 39 million people worldwide are living with HIV. More than 23 million, or 69%, are in sub-Saharan Africa. It has been 40 years since HIV was identified as the cause of AIDS and 36 years since the first HIV vaccine trial. But the world still doesn't have a working vaccine. So the latest partnership between the US and Uganda comes as a major step forward in efforts to prevent the spread of HIV in Africa and as a ray of hope for millions across the world.
the toning and the messaging of that news piece. It's by an American media, I guess. It's a Western media, of course. They have to focus on the Western side. They have to make it look like they are helping us, while in real sense, they are not really helping us. It's a guinea pig type of situation. So a big shout out to Jiba Jaba, who's with me, and he's saying that there's plenty of HIV in Manhattan and Los Angeles too. And he says it's double speak if it didn't produce the desired side effects. Yep, that is to do with why they halted. I hadn't thought about it in that direction. That the reason they halted, it was supposed to be a 4-year experiment against what they were calling the PrEP vac. It was being called the PrEP vac. It was supposed to be a new HIV vaccine. So the reason they might have halted it, as Jiba Jiba is saying, and I hadn't thought about it in that way, is that it didn't produce the desired side effect, which has always been a challenge for them. I think it has always been a challenge for them deciphering the African DNA, because the African DNA, the African genome, the African body, the African mind, the African person is very resilient to almost each and every you give them whichever disease you give them, they are going to they are very, very resilient. So that is why even for the COVID vaccine, it was supposed to work it was supposed to have a certain effect, with the messenger RNA manipulation, the Pfizer's and the Johnsons and Johnsons supplying tons and tons of vaccines to Africa, and wondering why nothing is happening, and now they are closing down all of them, with Johnson and Johnson and Pfizer closing down even the plants that they had in Kenya, the South African plant closing down because the demand for the vaccines is no longer there. Even after vaccinating so many people, it still never had the desired effect. And I personally think they sometimes have a hard time cracking the African genome, the African DNA. They might have it on paper, they might have its composition and structure, but an African is a very resilient person in matters disease, in terms of what. That is why you look at even some of the conditions that Africans live in some of those places. You go to a place like Kibera, for example, and you see the conditions that those people live in, and majority of them never go to hospitals, even in those conditions. And the hospitals are even worse. They're the ones that Kid was saying, you might get sick from going to the hospital alone. You are taking somebody there and you get sick for taking them there because of the condition. But you look at that, and it's still people are able to survive and people are able to live healthy. And you look at DRC, for example, the amount of toxins that those people are exposed to as they mine, in as much as many of them die, still the resilience and the fact that they start mining at early ages and are able to even get to maturity, to grow old, is something spectacular. The resilient that if the same conditions were applied to other races and other people, then I don't think they would have the ability to have the same level of resilience. So it becomes really, really hard for even as much as we have so many conversations surrounding eugenics, so many conversations surrounding racism in the 21st century, and of course trying to control people and systems and countries. It's still a hard task for them because the African DNA is a hard one to crack.
First Post reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome.
I think that was all from this Western media house. I just wanted to show you the test that they're currently running in Uganda as we speak, a HIV vaccine. They have come up with a new HIV vaccine that they are now testing in Uganda. They have enrolled 1,500 Ugandans for the same. The first phase was supposed to run from 2020 to 2024. It was, however, cancelled because apparently the data was not supporting the experiments, and they cancelled the same. Looks like they are now resuming on the experiment.
Many African countries have been victim to inhumane clinical trials by international pharmaceutical companies, raising human rights concerns. Incidents of unethical experimentation, lacking informed consent, and forced medical procedures have been claimed and prosecuted. Welcome to Tunacheki, and in this video we present 5 unethical medical experiments that used Africans as guinea pigs. Remember to subscribe and ring the notification icon so you don't miss any contraception in Zimbabwe. During the 1970s, in a bid to deal with the rising African population in then Rhodesia, a drug known as Depo-Provera was brought into the country and used as a population control measure. According to the reports, the old white government practiced forced.
Don't look even so far back into Rhodesia in the 70s. There were claims that some of the vaccines for example, I gave this story of how they vaccinated each and every Kenyan girl below 10 years. If you have anybody watching from Kenya knows this, that they vaccinated each and every Kenyan girl child below 10 years against cervical cancer. And they were not even seeking consent from the parents. They were just visiting schools and vaccinating. They would go to a class, call out all the girls, vaccinate them. The vaccination was funded by WHO, UNICEF, and some other entities. And they're not even asking for consent from anybody. you send your child to school, they come back home vaccinated. And it was them targeting girls below the age of 10. I do understand cervical cancer is a big of an issue and has killed many people, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And the whole talk about cancer, it's indeed not a good thing. It's a disaster. It's a pandemic that should be controlled. But my main worry is, did the Kenyan government take the cervical cancer vaccines to the lab first? Or did they just receive them from the WHO and inject it on our kids? Did they, for a moment, did they try maybe taking them to the labs and actually trying to identify what is it that is in there? Did they seek for the parents' consent? Imagine sending your child to school and they come back vaccinated without your consent. You don't even know what they got vaccinated against.
Sterilization on African Zimbabwean women. Although this drug was approved for use in Zimbabwe, it was never approved for contraceptive use in the USA and in the UK because of its devastating side effects. The drug was later banned in Zimbabwe in 1981, but the women who took the drug still suffer from side effects to this day. Number 4, the Navrongo experiment in Ghana. This family planning experiment revealed that researchers experimented with the birth control drug, the Depo-Provera, as a test run for a border population campaign on approximately 9,000 impoverished women in Navrongo, in Ghana. The experiment was funded by the USAID and the Rockefeller Foundation. The women were told they were being provided with routine healthcare while data was specifically collected and analyzed for the research experiment. Number 3, the meningitis testing in Nigeria. In 1996, when the northern state of Kano was hit by Africa's worst ever meningitis epidemic, Pfizer, the world's biggest research-based pharmaceutical company, took advantage and tested the antibiotic Trovan on 200 children. The test resulted in the death of 11 children and varying degrees of injuries and other disorders. An investigation by experts later concluded that Pfizer had administered the drug as part of an illegal clinical trial without authorization by the Nigerian government or consent from the children's parents. This led to a lawsuit from the Nigerian government over informed consent. Number 2, the Majengo experiments in Kenya. Canadian researchers followed a group of Kenyan prostitutes who remained HIV negative despite long exposure to HIV positive men. They were hoping to discover what kept the women immune and use their findings to develop a HIV vaccine. But later on, some of these women thought to be immune to the HIV virus became infected. The researchers discovered that a specific cell mechanism in their bodies had kept these women free from the infection. The biggest complaint that came out of the Majengo case study was that prostitutes used in the study were exploited by the researchers, not compensated for their contribution, and not credited for their contribution to science. Number 1, HIV/AIDS testing in various African countries. In 1994, the US government conducted clinical trials in the Ivory Coast, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Malawi, and Zimbabwe through projects funded by the Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization. The trials included testing of over 17,000 African women for a medication that prevented mother-to-child transmission of the HIV/AIDS virus. Although the trials were about preventing mother-to-child transmission of AIDS, the researchers refused to provide all pregnant women with a drug that could prevent infants from acquiring the AIDS virus during childbirth, even though they had it, thereby making transmission likely. As a result, an estimated 1,000 babies contracted the HIV/AIDS virus.
It's how these things happen and nothing is done that is more saddening than the things happening themselves. For example, there are 1,000 kids that contracted HIV because their parents were being subjected to a drug that was under testing, that was still under testing, and they did it with 1,000 kids. The number might be higher, and now they gave the mothers that drug, and now due to that is negligence in the first place. The fact that you're not even sure the drug is gonna work, and now because you are not sure and because you are using me to test your shit, now my kid will not even be able to live to see 30. These are 1,000 lives that cut short because, man, and for example, with the Kenyan case, where, leave alone the Majengo case, the ones that they were testing on prostitutes who are not contracting HIV, trying to identify why they were contracting. And it is suspicious, as Jiba Jaba is saying, that they became infected after the tests. Before the test, they were immune. After the tests, they started contracting the disease. But anyway, and he's telling me that it's screwing up with the monthly cycle. And I want you to notice one thing. He's talking about the Kenyan young girls vaccination. I want you to note one thing. Majority of the experiments being done are focused on one thing. Actually, 99% of the experiments on Africans, on anything, they are focused on the African woman. Whether as a young girl, as an older woman, as a nursing mom, as a pregnant woman, majority of them are focused on the African woman. They're not even so much on the men. Majority of these experiments, even the one in Uganda, was not focused on the men. It was focused on the women. So it's the African. If you want to know the intentions of this, and Jiba Jaba corrects me and tells me it's not them being negligent. It's not negligent. It's intentional. The fact that they could tell 1,000 mothers to ignore all the safety precautions that, it's not normally when a HIV positive mom gives birth to a child, there are things that they can do to make sure that they don't transmit the same to the baby. It's possible for a mom to be HIV positive and the child is not. However, in this case, they told them to ignore all the other precautions because we have this drug that is going to work. And for that reason, 1,000 people got infected, 1,000 kids. The 1,000 kids are going to mature and spread the disease to 1,000 other people or more, because at the end of the day, they are going to reach their teenhood, their youthful age, and But anyways, if you look at all of them, they are focused on the African woman. That is going to guide you on the real agenda of these vaccines, the real agenda of these tests that they always do, especially in Uganda and Nigeria. It's going to guide you on why would you focus on the African woman. If you look at the numbers that we have in Africa, which is our biggest advantage, for the fact that we have the numbers advantage. We have that advantage because of the African woman. The African woman can give birth to even 10 kids without having to go through any cesarean, without having to go. Our grandmothers, and it's not even an exaggeration, never used to go to the hospital for nothing. My grandmother had 13 kids. Never went to a hospital for any of those. No CS, nothing. Gave birth at home, delivered at home. So I don't want to talk too much because this is among the last remaining YouTube channels that we have. But if you want to know what is happening, then why would they focus on the African woman? Because the African woman is the source of life. The African woman is the one that is giving life to Africa. It's the one that is and as we come to the end, if you have a disease that can be transferred to the child, it is responsible to bear a child or impregnate. Not just responsible, it's inhumane for you to pass a disease to a poor innocent child. So if you know you have a disease that can be transferred to a child, it is advisable for you not to even give birth. Because why would you ruin your child's life from birth. Even though for this case it was purely intentional, because I understand a HIV positive mom there are measures they can do, for example, avoid breastfeeding, and then if the delivery is done correctly and some other things, then it is possible for them not to transmit the disease at all to the child. It's perfectly possible. It's perfectly normal. It's possible for them not to transmit. But anyways, they had to do that because they wanted. It's not even negligent. It's intentional. And the campaign that has been targeted towards African women, if you look at it, from the lesbianism trying to be spread towards them, to them trying to be made into sex dolls, it just spells one word: eugenics. Let's come to the end of the show. Joby and Kamlesh are coming up in the next 5 minutes with their musical show. Make sure you join them. I'll be here tomorrow on Tubonge and later on Black Hot Fire updates. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day. This has been Tuesday Updates. Much love.